Ladies and gentlemen, today I am talking with my good friend and paisano, Leo Zagami. Leo is a brilliant researcher and prolific author whose work spans a variety of subjects, from secret societies to the Vatican and the New World Order. He descends from a family with ties to the infamous Illuminati and has himself defected from that group and is now working vigorously to expose their satanic agenda. Before we get into our discussion, I would like to remind everyone of my upcoming Birthright Conference taking place in Nashville, Tennessee, from the 6th through the 7th of May. The conference will feature topics related to transhumanism, aliens, UFOs, and Bible prophecy. Tickets are currently 20% off. You can find a link to purchase your tickets in the description of this video or on my website, timothyalberino.com. I would also like to direct you to my book, Birthright, upon which the content of the conference is based. Birthright continues to be a 5-star bestseller on Amazon with over 800 reviews. If you haven't read my book, I highly suggest that you do. Leo, you have recently published a new book yourself in your Confession series entitled Confessions of an Illuminati, Volume 7. From the occult roots of the Great Reset to the populist roots of the Great Reject. In the introduction of your book, you write, I will finally expose the true Masonic, Illuminati, Jesuit roots of the satanic Davos agenda, headed by German professor Klaus Schwab. Let's start with a definition of the Great Reset. So what is the Great Reset, Leo? Who are the Davos group, and what exactly is their agenda?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all, here. It's been a few years since we met in Rome. We had a great experience, and actually a very particular one indeed. This is my latest book that, of course, people can purchase now on Amazon. There's also the hardcover for the first time option. It's going quite well. And, of course, it's the only book that actually gives you the occult roots of this Great Reset, because a lot of people talk, of course, of the geopolitical implications of it, the nature of the business side that has inspired it. But in this book, I wanted to completely do something different here. So, because when you have, for example, at the opening speech of the first meeting they ever did, Otto von Habsburg, head of the House of Habsburg-Lorraine, you understand that this is linked to a much more complex background. My studies, as you know, are also part of my own experience. That's why I'm here now in the United States. I had to flee Italy because, like I was explaining you before we started, in Italy, there is no freedom of speech. As a journalist, you can be arrested for what you write. It's not only a civil offense, but a criminal offense, what you write and you say. Because they kept the old rules, laws that were passed during the fascist time by Mussolini, and they continue to implement them, even if then they have the judiciary in the hands of the leftists together with the mob. So you have really a very powerful group of people that was after me. In this group of people, you have also a guy called Aurelio Peccei. He's no longer with us, but he was inspirational for Klaus Schwab because he founded the Club of Rome. So the Club of Rome that was founded a couple of years at the end of the 60s, in 1968, it was formalized. It became really the groundwork, the speculative groundwork for then the implementation of the Davos agenda. In fact, it was actually Aurelio Peccei that in 1973, if I don't get it wrong, because all these dates, as you know, is a very complex book full of dates, and I also have put something like over 400 footnotes and citations, just to be very academic about it, because of course you can't mess with this kind of people. You have to be very correct if you don't want to get in trouble also with writing things that are not correct. And I want also this book to be taken seriously because, like I said, the opening speech brings us to the Order of the Golden Fleece. Now, when you study the Illuminati of Adam Weishaupt, you know that they were connected to the Order of the Golden Fleece and to the Austrian nobility back then. They had some very important members. So in this book, I have basically an essay on the roots of this Great Reset, which actually brings us to the roots of the Illuminati. The Illuminati Order of Adam Weishaupt that was founded in 1776, but already in the 1780s was exposed and then persecuted and had to go underground. They could no longer use this name because in the middle of the 1780s they had been exposed. But that doesn't mean that they stopped their activities. Actually, they continued their activities, and 100 years later, they tried to reestablish themselves with the name Illuminati in Germany and then in Austria. I always talk about Germany and Austria because, like I say in this book, Switzerland, Germany, and Austria were really have been the playground of the Illuminati. And because of the background of the Illuminati, we need to go and research from where they come from and what is their ideal that has then destroyed the absolute monarchies of Europe. Let's remember one thing, that the first project the Illuminati had was to destroy the monarchies. And there is a reason for that. People here in America, of course, made a decision. The father founders, I explained this in the book very clearly. They decided to form a republic. And on this republic on which we stand, we are very comfortable because it's actually probably the only republic that works out in the world. The other ones are really they're puppets of the powers, you know. It's a fictional kind of democracy, even if this is a constitutional republic, not really a democracy. The way we are free here in America makes it possible for me, Leo Zagami, with the First and Second Amendment, to guarantee both my freedom of expression and my protection, something that doesn't happen, for example, in Canada, which we have seen lately suffering from obscurantism and persecution from an ever so oppressive Justin Trudeau, which is part of the World Economic Forum and the Davos Agenda. Going back to the roots of the Davos Agenda and the roots of the Illuminati are the ones that kick-started that process, which then materialized communism as we know it. So I wanted to historically place all the proper links in this book so people understand how communism was developed. Okay, we can say that the Jesuits were very much inspirational for communism because they experimented forms of communism in South America, in the so-called reducciones. But then later on, implementing communism into the Western world, there was something that had to be done for them to break, first of all, the absolute monarchies. And those absolute monarchies, their main problem with those absolute monarchies were they were there to defend Christianity. Now, people need to understand, the Tsar of Russia, great defender of the faith. Same can be said for the Austro-Hungarian Empire to a certain extent, but also to the Kaiser in Germany and to other monarchies that one after the other capitulated to the Illuminati. So in this book, I also show the instructions of Adam Weishaupt's degree system, which shows us that the Illuminati clearly stated that if a monarch was not under their control, then they had to, in some way, get close to him, convince him to follow their policies, and if eventually he will not listen to them, they will have to eliminate him. And this has been really the evolution of the Illuminati that from Adam Weishaupt, then went on to form a nucleus of a stronghold of this new philosophy in Paris. And then with the League of the Just, with Karl Marx, we arrived to the Karl Marx Manifesto. And it was actually an Italian, Filippo Buonarroti, who actually himself was initiated in Italy and then emigrated to France, that was particularly inspirational to all this. He is actually known as the first Italian communist. But regarding the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab, he is following exactly the project that Adam Weishaupt laid out. Exactly. I mean, it's not changing anything, because at the end, Adam Weishaupt said, you have to own nothing and be happy, because we will take all your ownership. The capitalist, but all private ownership will be eliminated. So we can study and as I was part of the Illuminati, as I was part of the Freemasons, I could better elaborate and see these similarities. That's why I wanted to make this book. And at the same time, there is also things that people don't know about lodges in Austria, lodges in Germany, that were particularly important into the inspiration of the Third Reich. Because for me, Klaus Schwab and the Davos Agenda is a Fourth Reich. He himself says that he is shaping the Fourth Industrial Revolution. In reality, he's shaping the Fourth Reich. And because this oppressive microchipping society in which everything is controlled, in which you have sensors all over your body, in which everything is related to a government, but also to a third party. For example, just this month, Klaus Schwab has published a report in which he confirms all this, because his will is to promote the digital ID and to have some kind of third party that is not the government to take care of the protection of your data. So this is, of course, for me, the mark of the beast. That's why the symbolism on the cover of the book here, I don't know if you noticed this symbolism, Timothy, I would like to explain it to you. Okay, we have, of course, Ahriman here, which is the spirit of the Antichrist. He is also discussed not only by Steiner in anthroposophy, but also by a Catholic group, which I talk about in this book, a specific Catholic group. And then there is, of course, in the background, you can't even see it because it's really in the background, is the dragon China, that is aiding the birth of the cyber Satan. If you go inside here, you will find the word. And this is actually, in a way, the symbol of the Illuminati, the sun, because the symbol of the Illuminati was a black dot on a white background, or vice versa. The fact that you have also this symbol here that we all know, of course, but is a symbol that we have also learned to we discovered thanks to the World Health Organization, though it's also used in America, it's used in Europe, of course, from the Medical Association. All this to represent how, and this is another symbol that appeared under here briefly in front of the United Nations. This they said it was like the beasts of the apocalypse, this lion with the wings. In reality, if you go and study old Persian myths, that is actually the symbol of Ahriman himself, which Ahriman in the ancient Zoroastrian tradition is really the demonic spirit, the spirit of evil. So my symbology here is to explain that in this book, you will understand who is behind the creation of this sanitary dictatorship, why it has been put in place, and why the Great Reset is so important for the establishment. Now, going back to the origins of it, the Davos Agenda was shaped after the Club of Rome. The Club of Rome, though, with Aurelio Peccei and another gentleman from Scotland, were very important for helping Klaus Schwab understand his project, because Klaus Schwab wanted to simply take the theories of the Club of Rome and put them into practice. Get the businessmen rounded up and politicians and everybody and get them to actually put them into fruition. So the Club of Rome with Aurelio Peccei gave their support to the Davos agenda, and with the MIT, they run these programs, World 1 to World 3, to study the future of the world in the early 70s with this early form of artificial intelligence. Now, the forecast of what will happen was then relayed by Aurelio Peccei in front of the Davos group in Davos. And at that point, in this, and now we have actually on the internet since 2018, I think the Australian TV has put an excellent video that actually shows an interview with representatives of the Club of Rome, who talk about the future, which they saw as a future that, of course, climate change, overpopulation, all these problems. So how are we going to sort out all these problems? We're going to sort them out, of course, with depopulation. and to eliminate part of the world, then we are facing now both a bacteriological warfare, we might face a nuclear warfare, and of course, all this is done for their plan. Why they want to depopulate the population plan? Why is it done now and it wasn't done before? There is a reason. Now they have the technology to get rid of mankind, not needing mankind anymore, because it's only a waste of resources. They want to get rid of them. They have the robots and the artificial intelligence that is gradually taking control is, in my eyes, and I already said that in volume 6.66 of my Confessions, which I don't know if you read, but it's also a very important book, because that is dedicated really to cyber Satan. And I wrote and published this book in early 2019, in February 2019. But if you actually see the back of that book, is the symbol of the World Health Organization. And nobody knew what was happening, it was about to happen. But in this book, I explain why I put that symbol. Because at the time, in 2018, there had been a meeting, first in the Vatican, and a week later in Astana, now known as Nur Sultan, which is in Kazakhstan. And in that meeting, the World Health Organization met with all their various counterparts and decided the crisis that will be unveiled a year later.
So the Great Reset is synonymous with the New World Order. And this, I think, what we've seen over the last 2 years is sort of the externalization of their agenda, using a pandemic to implement a control grid in the nations, to consolidate power in the nations and implement a global control grid now that they have the technology to do it. Because as you said, at the inception of the Illuminati, they didn't have these technologies. That was back in the 18th or 17th century. I can't remember.
And they didn't even have this technology of control during the Soviet Union, because one of the reasons I explain in this book why the Soviet Union didn't work back then, but the people who actually were part of it now wanted to work in some way, because now they see that finally we have the technology to do the same thing and much better, because now it's possible to have a complete control of the human species.
And that's an important point, that speaking of the Soviet Union, that the Great Reset, the New World Order, their political agenda is predicated on Marxism or neo-Marxism. And because it suits them, because Marxism pretends to be a political worldview that champions the working man, the working class. But of course, neo-Marxists have taken what was once which was once a conflict of class and castes in society, and they've morphed it into more of a conflict between races. And that's why we're seeing all the Black Lives Matter stuff today, and why the New World Order is pushing, why the Davos group is pushing this idea of equity, because they've transformed the conflict from a conflict of of class and caste to a conflict of race. And now we are seeing the manifestation, as I said, the externalization of their agenda. And I'm of the opinion that they had to accelerate their plan because of the rise of populism, which I think was, to some degree, was unforeseen by the architects of the Great Reset. I think that they had to accelerate their plan and probably launch aspects of this plan earlier than they would have liked, obviously because of President Trump here in the United States, who was dismantling much of their agenda, at least as it pertains to the United States. And then also the Brexit movement in England. And so you had this wave of populism that was beginning to expand over the globe, and so they had to bring that to us. They had to stop that. They had to stifle the populist movement and nationalistic movements in different nations. And I don't think that they couldn't allow Trump to have another term. And I think that's why they decided to pull the trigger on what became this, the pandemic.
But I think that it's very important, in fact, the speech that Trump gave in Davos himself. That's why I reported in my book, Volume 7, the speech that Trump gave in Davos was antagonizing the socialist agenda of Klaus Schwab. Now, I really, as you know, supported Donald J. Trump. I was part of Italians for Trump, which was the first organization outside of the United States to support his bid for the presidency, not even his presidency. So in the very early stages, and we did very well, as you know. We had very much interest from the worldwide media in 2017 when he took his oath. We had a very important event taking place in front of the parliament, in front of the American embassy. But the problem is how reliable is Trump after he went through 4 years of presidency in which he might have been partly corrupted by the big pharma. We see that now with his support of the vaccine, which I totally dislike, and I think has made him lose really a lot of credibility, at least in my eyes. I'm a modest person. I don't say that I'm important politically, but I think that at least for people like me who really believe from the first minute that Trump could make a difference, to see him supporting in this way and minimizing also the criticism that he himself got on stage while he was proposing that endorsement, it's like it makes me understand that maybe he can be bought out. Now, when in 2015 I decided to support Trump, I said clearly to our common friend Alex Jones that I would be supporting him because I thought that supporting Trump meant supporting somebody who could not be bought. Because, I think that actually the fact he's been so genuine and so good during his presidency was that he was not the kind of guy that you can go like Barack Obama. Sorry, Barack, when you finish your presidency, you want a 70 million book deal? No problem. Just say this, do that. And he will do it because he's, just a guy that can be bought out. No, Trump was not like that. But at one point...
No, because Trump was independently wealthy when he came into office, which is always something that we should desire in our politicians, because we've seen too many politicians enter office at upper middle class level, and then when they finish their term, they're multimillionaires. So obviously the system, at least in America, I'm sure globally, is steeped in corruption.
It's a little bit like
money before, money is a corrupting power.
Yeah, we were discussing earlier, if you remember, the fact I told you that the Illuminati wanted to destroy the absolute monarchies, and they actually managed, after the French Revolution and the First World War, to pass on to the constitutional monarchies, those who survived the purge. But if we think about the concept of a monarch, not a monarch like the Queen of England who has a bunch of money and uses it to buy influence and get people to shut up when it comes down to his son and his wrongdoings. No, I'm not talking about the Queen of England, who is a corrupt monarch. That's why he continues to be a monarch up until today. Otherwise, she will be like the Tsar or other monarchs that ended up in a very bad way. Now, the thing is that a monarch, if you think about it, when he's a genuine monarch, he doesn't own anything, because everything is his. So at the same time, he is like the absolute monarch that the Illuminati disliked. They disliked him because he was for God and country, and he owned nothing because he owned everything. Everything was absolutely his. But at the same time, nothing, because a monarch, what does he own? What can you offer a monarch? What, I mean, you went to a Tsar. Nowadays, Putin is like a modern Tsar. If you go to Putin and say, Putin, what can I offer you? Maybe Putin, still not being exactly a Tsar, could maybe be corrupted. But a Tsar in itself, with the sacred office that he was actually bestowed upon, he will not be able to do that. There is no corruption with an absolute monarch who is a genuine absolute monarch in charge of his people. There is being corruption with monarchy the moment in which the Illuminati started to corrupt them. Now, the same thing can be said in modern politics. A lot of people saw with Donald J. Trump a sort of absolute monarch that could really save the day. The problem is that they got under his skin with a series of court cases, challenges, investigations, and whatnot. They're still doing it nowadays. And I think that at one point they must have found a way to make him comply to at least part of their agenda. I'm not saying, like I said in my book, I'm not saying that, of course, here we can go against our only hope, which is in the midterms or in the next election to replace somebody like Trump or the Republican Party in charge. Because they, of course, they are the only possibility we have to preserve the only remaining shred of Republican values, the values in this constitution. Otherwise, this republic, like I said in the book, is finished. Because in its DNA, you see, the problem here is that in the next few years, the technological advances that are already in place in Russia, in China, all over the world, make us basically understand that it's much more effective to have one man in control than to have people that every 4 years are changed and sent home. Why Xi Jinping has changed his own rules within the communist chairman, as a chairman of the Communist Party in China? Why did he make himself a ruler for life? Same thing can be said for Vladimir Putin, because these people know that in this way they have a possibility of really molding and crafting their country. That's why the people who actually are here in the United States being corrupted by China and Russia, because China and Russia are together, because fundamentally they're part of a communist brigade. Now, it's true that Russia is no longer formally communist, but in their minds and in their values, a lot of them still are. And this I can tell you, Timothy, because I've been to Russia probably 40, 50 times. I worked with the Russian Ministry of Culture. I was there for many years working as a music producer, as a DJ, as a radio presenter, as a TV presenter. I did so many things in Russia that I know the country inside and out. So in 2002, I was invited to attend to play music, imagine, at the Bolshoi, with Vladimir Putin, everybody from all the diplomats in Moscow, for an event that was very exclusive, dedicated to the children victims of terrorism. And Billy Cobham was playing, I don't know if you know Billy Cobham, very good drummer, plays. He was there, and there was also a saxophone player who had played with Bill Clinton, who was very famous, and all these people. And at that time, I was still within the New World Order setup. I was still within their, in their favor, no? And so I could see how things were developing. And they told me very clearly, Leo, in the future, we would like to go back to aristocracy. We would like to abandon the experiment that we did. But at the moment, it seems like we have transformed Russia in a sort of democratic dictatorship, which they explained me is a concept they embraced in the early 70s. However, now we find ourselves with the Davos agenda, a group of people that include Vladimir Putin himself, that include Angela Merkel, that include Joe Biden, that include everybody that is playing this game, because in the end, this great reset is for them also a continuation of this great game that was played also during the Cold War. And in my book, I wanted to, first of all, explain how the liberal pandemic started in California, for example. That's why I came to live in California, and that's why I explain it very well in my book. People say, why do you come and live in California? Because like a scientist should go and study the origins of the Wuhan China virus in China to see where it comes from. The same thing can be said about the liberal pandemic that we have here in the United States. Where is it coming from? Who are the people who are ruining and controlling our society here?
San Francisco. San Francisco.
So we have to be here to understand it better. And that's what I'm trying to do.
So I want to make a couple of points here. First, it's important to realize that in America, our constitutional republic does work. The problem is it's been undermined. So we're suffering under a
Timothy. If you read my book, I say exactly what you're saying.
Yes, and I just want to explain to the audience that the problem with our republic is that it's been captured by globalist elites who are operating in what's commonly referred to as the deep state, but it's probably better described as the administrative state. It's this deeply entrenched group of bureaucrats who never leave, and they have accumulated power in the American system. And so everybody always talks about in our media and around the world, everybody's always talking about democracy. But democracies are notoriously problematic for many reasons. And that's why we do not have a democracy in America. Well, we're starting to have a democracy now, but that's why our founders gave us a republic. And our republic was modeled on the Greco-Roman system, mainly on the Roman system. And it was intentionally designed not to descend into a pure democracy. And I'll tell you who does like democracies. Marxists love democracies.
Absolutely.
Because it's very easy for them to manipulate the people.
But that's what I say in the book. The problem is here, because of the time we're living, because of the technology that is being put into place, we are changing, we have the midterm elections, then we have the other election. These people don't have any elections. They have one person, and now they can take that advantage because the technology that they have works better with that kind of system. That's why the elite wants to move to a socialist communist system. Now, I also say in my book that unfortunately, it seems like the 1776 Republic maybe doesn't have the antidotes for this kind of attack from this kind of, because it's very pervasive, it's an infiltration. When they buy our politicians, after 2 years, they are in Washington. What is left? I mean, after
Well, what is
40
left, and we've seen this throughout the pandemic, and the strength of the United States is not the federal government. The federal government is the problem in the United States. Once the federal government is corrupted, it's very difficult to recover. To recover the original intention that the founders had for the federal government. It becomes too large, it becomes too strong, it becomes overbearing. However, we have seen in the American system that what has worked and what has pumped the brakes on the globalist agenda for total control through the pandemic has been the states, the American states. So you have states like the state that I'm in, like Montana, you have Texas, you have some of these red states that still maintain a degree of autonomy, and were able to push back against the dictatorial the dictatorial inclination of the Biden administration. And thanks to these states, these red states, we did not, and we have not yet, and probably will not, in my estimation, descend in the kind of tyranny that the Canadians are experiencing, that the Australians are experiencing, that the Austrians are experiencing. And so there still is some hope in America because of the Republic and the strength of the Republic.
And that's why I said to you, we still, of course, want to support the political process and support the Republican Party for another bit to reacquire the situation, normalize the situation in this country before the decline becomes impossible to recover.
This is the problem that the globalists have when in their infiltration of American politics. It's the states, it's the red states, because they've already captured the federal government to a large degree. But their power is much less. Their power is much less effective. They're much less effective at the state level, and that's part of the reason why they want open borders in America, so that they can infiltrate, so that they can stack the deck in the red states with non-citizens, because non-citizens have no allegiance to the Constitution or to the Republic.
But like I show in my book, even the red states are starting to have George Soros money creeping in.
Yes. Yes.
It's kind of like becoming a big problem, even in the red states, this corruption.
I live in Montana, and there's a couple of Montana, for the most part, is a very red state, one of the reddest states in the union, and overwhelmingly voted MAGA in the last election. But there are bastions of liberalism. There's a couple cities in Montana that lean liberal. And the biggest one is the city of Missoula. And even in Montana, there was rampant voter fraud in Missoula. And this is proven. This is not a conspiracy theory. This was proven.
Let me ask you.
I believe it was. I believe they found 6 to 7% of the votes in Missoula in the last election cycle, the presidential election, were fraudulent in Montana, in a red state of Montana.
But let me ask you, is it like Nevada or other places that from being red states, they have been occupied in their main cities, and then that's what...
Of course.
This technique is happening. They try to make it happen also in Texas, because Austin has become a liberal shithole. Sorry if I say that word. That's how
that's what it is.
Yeah.
You know, I should have started our conversation by reminiscing about the last time that you and I were together.
And that is actually something that I mentioned in my book, if you know. I actually mentioned an encounter in my book, in volume 7, because it was an extraordinary encounter, because we ended up in some of the most sacred places of the Catholic Church.
Well, it was 2015, and I was, at the time, I was in Rome with my film crew filming for a documentary we were doing at the time, The Unholy See. And we met with you in Rome, and we were headed to the Vatican. We picked you up in front of your apartment, and then we were headed to the Vatican. And what makes that experience so vivid in my mind and unique is that the Vatican was in a sort of an emergency mode where it was lights out at the Vatican. I don't know if you remember, but they turned all the lights off in Vatican City. It was completely dark. and there were soldiers carrying automatic weapons running all over the place around the Vatican. I think they were both the Vatican police, but then also the Italian military. Because there was an ISIS threat. Do you remember that? This was during the height of ISIS in 2015.
Yeah.
There was some kind of a threat against the Vatican.
Well, no, they also had been, I think, during the night. Then for us, there was an attack, I think, here in America, also in California, going on then by ISIS. So we were really at the height of it.
But this was the moment that we were scheduled to pick you up and go into the Vatican and film in the Vatican. And precisely that night, it was lights out. And it was soldiers running all over the place with automatic weapons, and people were coming out except for us. We were going in, and so you have all these soldiers all over the place with automatic weapons.
And then I managed through my very creative mind to get inside the Jesuit headquarters.
That's right. We walked inside. So people need to picture this in their heads. This wasn't the night that I went to the Vatican with Leo. This was not like, the typical evening in Rome where you have a lot of tourists walking around taking pictures and selfies in St. Peter's Square. This was a lockdown, lights out, military all over the place, and we are going into the Vatican. And I think because of those extraordinary circumstances, you were able to get us into the headquarters, the Jesuit headquarters in Vatican City, and we walked in.
It was a little bit risky.
It was a little bit risky, that's for sure. But we managed to go in there with our cameras, and we actually filmed inside of the lobby of the Jesuit headquarters.
See, the thing is that a couple, I think, days prior, I managed to befriend this guy who was working there as a portier. It was a security guard, I think, from Romania, whatever, who knew about me, knew my book. But in the same time, I was kind of there was an episode, I think, somebody had collapsed in front of the place, drunken, because Bergoglio has said to all the poor people, if they want to just sleep around the Vatican, and all these homeless people started to sleep all over the place, and there was this guy collapsed, and we had to call an ambulance inside the Jesuit. In a way, I had familiarized with them, so they believed that I was. And I said, no, I'm just here, some American friends who want to do a little filming here. Of course, when we started filming, I noticed, and you noticed too, that we saw the cameras. They also had cameras on us.
Right on us, that's right.
So we had to be very much like we had our time, because sooner or later they will. it was crazy.
No, it was a surreal experience because we were walking around Vatican City, and it was dark. And there was nobody there except for these military guys.
Unfortunately, my connections in the Vatican and with the police made it okay because I had some inside people that could actually be, let's say, they didn't go after us and think we were terrorists because I knew the right people and I could address actually the head inspector, I think, at the time who was there. I spoke with him and so it was okay. But it was definitely a very weird experience. Very weird experience.
Yes, it was. So what is the Vatican's role in the Great Reset? Is the Vatican playing a role? What is of course, Pope, to remind people, Bergoglio, Pope Francis is the first, and we should never forget this. Pope Francis is the first Jesuit Pope. He's the first Jesuit to ascend the throne, to occupy the throne of St. Peter.
Remember that night I brought you also not only to the Jesuit headquarters, but I also brought you in front of the church where they do the Black Masses in the Vatican.
I remember it well.
And it was a very, very important moment because
we filmed it.
You filmed it, and I think what happened to you when you went back to America, you told me some crazy story that I hope that
I'll be honest with you. People can go. We don't have to get into this here, but there might have been, and I want to be very careful. There might have been an attempt on my life that almost killed me and my family.
But I will not be surprised, though, Timothy, because you see, I want to tell you something I never told you before. But only 4 years before you came, and we did that experience, we had done a similar experience with a guy called Damian Chapa, who is like a guy, Hollywood kind of guy who did some minor movies and stuff. And he just came to Rome and he wanted to do a documentary about me and the Vatican and stuff. Well, the documentary was shot and we managed to go into places where we shouldn't have been. In fact, at one point they busted us, but whatever, but in Santa Croce in Jerusalem, I don't know if we've been there. In any case, he went back. I think he had to pass through Germany. They took all the filming. They arrested him. They took all the filming from him, and he was never able to get it back. In fact, he begged me for filming again. I said, sorry, I give you one chance. I can't do the same thing 2 times because we will not, I mean, it's like when Alex came to Rome. I mean, we did it, we went around like crazy one night, but if you do it one night, you don't, you can surprise them. And then at that point,
yeah.
But you don't have the surprise factor, then at that point, they will immediately block you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it was, and I want to be clear, I'm not accusing the Vatican, and I don't know exactly if what happened to me and my family was an accident or was a hit. But it was during the filming, while I was in the midst of editing that documentary, that there was a carbon monoxide incident here. And many of my viewers are familiar with this. It happened back in 2015. There was a carbon monoxide incident here in my house. And it was miraculous. If it weren't for my wife suddenly waking up and going to check on the baby, we would have all been dead the following morning. And again, I don't know if it was an accident. There's a whole lot more to the story, and there's detectives involved, and there's all kind of weird stuff. So, I don't know. I just don't know what happened.
Can you tell us what the detectives ultimately told you?
The detectives, and this is a long story, but the detectives, which I don't have time to go into the details here, but at some point in the course of this event, I was interviewed by some detectives, by a particular detective, who was asking me. The first thing he asked me was, he said, "I'm gonna record you, and I'd like to ask you a few questions." His first question to me was, "Do you have any enemies?" That was his first question. What do you do for a living? Do you have any enemies? Do you know of anybody that might have an issue with you that might be looking to harm you or your family? And so that was a line of questioning. And I asked him point blank. I asked the detective. I said, your line of questioning suggests that that you suspect foul play in what happened. And I was in the hospital, by the way, when he was interviewing me. And he said, "Well, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but I do suspect foul play." And he said, we were actually told. He told me that they were actually contacted by the fire department, and somebody from the fire department contacted the detectives, the police, and said, "Hey, there's something off here. Something's wrong. This isn't just a run-of-the-mill carbon monoxide poisoning situation. Something's off here." And what they meant was that there are indications of foul play. Now, having said that, I have not gone into the full story. There's a whole lot of details in this story. But having said that, after the dust settled on that experience, I still to this day am not sure if what happened was an accident or if somebody tried to take me out.
Well, I mean,
and my family.
Okay, I told you that 4 years before there was this guy called Diamond Chapa, but even earlier, as early as early 2008, when Project Camelot did their famous interview with me.
I remember it.
Well, you know what happened to them? Their car was broken into just before arriving at my place. They were taken at the border. They were basically taken all the filming again. They actually managed to materialize that very bad, low-quality interview thanks to some low-quality copy that they managed to preserve from another camera and other stuff. But the actual interview was lost. The real high-quality interview was lost because, of course, they intervened also in the case of Project Camelot. So, I mean, how many occurrences like this there can be,
You're a dangerous guy to be associated with, Leo.
I mean, it was like all these people that come to me have that, and then they have all these experiences, and then there is the Italians of Mistero. You remember I told you that I used to participate with a TV show called Mistero in Italy. Yeah. Went on Berlusconi's TV. Well, the producer died. The writer of the show died, and the the producer of the show died. In the matter of 2 or 3 months, one from the other, in very mysterious circumstances. I have a text message from Cavalli, who was the head of Quadri, the company who made the show, who said, "Many enemies, much honor." 2 days later, he was dead. So, I mean, it's like, it's really, for me, it's heavy. I mean, that I see this kind of thing happening. And when it happened to you, I was like, oh, maybe I should have told you something before, but
well, people need to understand too that you've been pursued and prosecuted by entities and agencies in Italy. So you've kind of been on the defense and running as well.
Yeah, well, that's why I ended up here. That's why I ended up here, because a lawsuit moved by a sovereign commander and a grand master of a specific obedience Masonic in Italy, for what I wrote about them in volume 1, basically brought me in front of a kangaroo court that, I sit down and the first thing they said is, what do you own? I said, what do I own? I'm not supposed here to give you my testimony first. What do I own? So, and then it was like a really particular court case, because when I opened the court case opened with the first session, it was in Perugia. And in Perugia, because I had managed to actually, with a journalist colleague of mine, to make a big article, it was full of people. The court was filled with people. And it was really weird, because I arrived at the entrance, there was a guy opening with the Masonic symbol here, the actual door room of the court. I was, oh my God, what is this? But then through my lawyer, we demonstrated that the book in question was published in the north of Italy and they had no jurisdiction. So then the court had to readdress everything and be moved to the north of Italy. When I went to give my testimony, they chose to do it when the whole building was closed in the afternoon. There was no people present whatsoever. And one of the things they said is, so you criticize and you put Freemasonry, deviant Freemasonry in connection with the Vatican, eh? Ah, okay. And that was like, you shouldn't even talk about that, It was like a threat. And I was like shocked. At one point I said to the judge, if we want to go by Masonic standards, this court case should actually be in a Masonic court, because we have Masonic courts which deal with things between Freemasons, which are, mm-hmm. She became furious. You are not recognizing the jurisdiction of the Italian Republic. I was like, well, quiet. I mean, I was just suggesting, I was just saying, usually, but this seems to be a court case out of this world, I said, So they were really after me. And they basically told me that I should have kneeled in front of this grandmaster. My lawyer came to me after the session. The court said, Leo, there might be a solution. I said, if you bow down to him and kiss his ring,
yeah,
he might forgive you. I said, what? You want me to do what? Well, sorry, I can't say what I told them, because we are here.
Someday, Leo, somebody's got to make a movie about your life.
I told them basically to screw themselves, that I would not bow down in front of anybody, and that they could kiss my ring. I mean, it was just out of this world, the level of corruption that I witnessed, because when I read in the court case, it was 2:30 in the afternoon, and I saw the Italian Grandmaster going in and out of the courtroom like it was his home. I was like, and the guy came from Calabria, which is in the south of Italy.
You talk about a rigged system.
I was like in Monza, near Milan, and this guy had power over people there, because the most powerful mafia in Italy that works with the Vatican is the 'Ndrangheta. So people need to understand how Italy is working. You have a cupola. The cupola is the St. Peter cupola, no? So you have the Pope, the Jesuits, and then you have all the various Masonic irregular lodges that then are filled with Cosa Nostra, 'Ndrangheta, Camorra. So you have specific lodges in which you have Matteo Messina Denaro, the head of Cosa Nostra. You have the head of the various 'Ndrangheta groups. 'Ndrangheta is now the most powerful mafia, by the way. It's not any longer.
So when you say Cosa Nostra, you're talking about the mafia, the mob.
Cosa Nostra is Sicily and is powerful, but now the most powerful is the Calabrese mafia called 'Ndrangheta. It's like in the last decades, they have taken from the Cosa Nostra because they are even more ruthless and they deal directly with the two cartels, cocaine cartels in Colombia. And they have their luck is that they control the main Italian port of Gioia Tauro. So they were able, through the main Italian port, to strike deals internationally, and they are the most powerful ones. So it's for me, it's been a really a wild ride, to tell you the truth. Even if I'm half Sicilian, even if my grandfather was a politician and a Freemason, and I have been also a Freemason myself, and I've been involved, I think that if I wasn't who I was by my bloodline, they would have probably
you'd be dead. Yeah, you'd be dead.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
A long time.
So let's wrap up by drawing this correlation between the Jesuit Pope Francis and what's happening at the Vatican and the Great Reset. How do those two things coincide?
Because you see, the very birth of the Illuminati order is connected with the Jesuits. Adam Weishaupt was a professor at Ingolstadt University, and he actually took on the faculty of canon law because the Jesuits at that point have been persecuted by the Vatican itself, because there was a diaspora period of the Jesuits. They were kicked out of the Vatican between the early 1770s to the 1815. So in that period of time, they participated to Freemasonry, they participated to the Golden Rose Squad, they influenced the Order of the Illuminati. And it was actually Baron Knig who written part of the rituals and collaborated with Adam Weishaupt, who suddenly came out of the Illuminati and said, Adam Weishaupt is just an agent of the Jesuits working, doing his job. You know, this is historic. I mean, I'm not saying some wild conspiracy theory. These are historical facts. So the Jesuits have an historic connection with the Illuminati, with certain Masonic groups, rites and whatnot. They keep on having this connection. And the connection also with the Vatican and Klaus Schwab is a very strong one. And in this book, there is the link of all links. The Pact of the Catacombs, made 3 weeks before the end of the Second Vatican Council in the catacombs of Domitilla in Rome, which I'm sure you know, that basically saw this eminent figure that was then invited by Klaus Schwab on purpose to the Davos group. With at the beginning, there was some opposition because the guy was actually regarded, they called him the Red Bishop, Bishop Camara, a Brazilian bishop. And in that Pact of the Catacombs, in 13 points, we are basically seeing a Marxist pact. And then we see that basically the Red Bishop is himself the mentor of Bergoglio.
I think we can say with confidence that the Klaus Schwab, the Great Reset, the globalist cabal are enacting their agenda, are attempting to execute their agenda through their globalist puppet liberal world leaders that are associated with the Davos group and so forth. And it's important for people to realize that when we talk about liberalism, not just in America, but in the West, generally speaking, that one of the primary propagators of liberal ideology, specifically as it pertains to theology, was the Jesuit order and is the Jesuit order. In fact, many of the most prestigious universities in America are Jesuit schools. And the Jesuits have been propagating this new theology called liberation theology, which is a Christian theological approach emphasizing the liberation of the oppressed. In certain contexts, it engages socioeconomic analyses with social concern for the poor and political liberation for oppressed peoples. In other contexts, it addresses other forms of inequality, such as race or caste. So liberation theology, it is a neo-Marxist theology that originated in Peru in the early 1970s with a Dominican priest named Gustavo Gutierrez. And liberation theology is the theological it's the theological framework for the socio-political movement of liberalism that we see sweeping the earth today.
But that's why I bring you back to Archbishop Elder Camara and those 40 bishops that went with him to the Pact of the Catacombs, because they were all South Americans and they were all instigators of this Latin American liberation theology later on. That's why I explain this in my book in detail, because when you go to point 10, for example, of the Pact of the Catacombs, it says this: we will do our utmost so those responsible for our governments and for our public services make and put into practice laws, structures, and social institutions required by justice and charity, equality, and harmonic and holistic development of all men and women, and by these means to bring about the advent of another social order worthy of the sons and daughters of mankind and of God. This is point 10 of 13 Marxist points that then will inspire later on the Church of Pachamama, because during the whole Pachamama controversy, I was basically witnessing this, and I was saying, wow, there's a lot of things happening here that remind me of the Pact of the Catacombs. And suddenly, they officially, during that synod that took place in Rome, went to renew the Pact of the Catacombs. And they did it openly with the support of the Pope. And even CNN said the Pact of the Catacombs is extremely influential and is communist and nice and great and woo. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, that people don't see these kind of things because they are in front of their eyes. Unfortunately, then people don't connect the dots. But that's why we need people like me and you to connect the dots.
When you talk about the Pachamama controversy, for those who don't know, Pachamama is in Central and South America. The Pachamama is basically synonymous with Mother Earth. And in the Inca, for example, Pachamama was one of their. I don't want to call her a goddess. She was more associated with Mother Earth. And there were instances, I believe, in Central America, correct me if I'm wrong, where they were setting up inside of Catholic churches. They were setting up idols to Pachamama.
I would say Pachamama is not such an innocent cat, because aside from sacrificing animals in parts of South America, they even sacrifice human beings. So I mean, the Pachamama is not such an innocent idolatry. You understand?
No, not by any means. Not by any means. And it's ubiquitous in as I said, in Central and South America, and the Inca. The Inca definitely had a cult of Pachamama, and they would sacrifice llamas and so forth to the Pachamama. Again, she is associated with Mother Earth. Yeah. But the controversy was that you were having in certain Central American Catholic churches, they were erecting statues or they were placing statues of Pachamama inside of the church.
What happened was in October 2019 in Rome, they started to place these Pachamamas in the church. They were doing all kinds of syncretic rituals with the Catholic shamans, waving all kinds of strange smoke things. I don't know. It was very shamanistic, the whole thing, and had nothing to do with Catholicism. And at one point, there was a guy who stole some of these Pachamamas, these statues, to throw them in the Tiber River. And it was a big scandal suddenly. Ooh! And at that point, what happened? That the Carabinieri, who are the mercenaries of the Vatican, but they actually are the Italian military police, whatever they are, because they have two forms of police in Italy, they said, we will go and recover them for the Pope. Boom! And throw themselves in the river and pick them up, and they were heroes. And I mean,
and that's just the
And
direction.
they were giving this sign, Timothy, when they were the Pachamama priest. This is the sign. I don't know if you remember, of bishops and things who participate to these hideous rituals. Now, this sign here is the sign of 33 degree of Freemasonry, by the way, just so you know. I mean, it's not just an innocent sign, and of the sign of the Pharaoh.
Right, and integrating the Pachamama cult into Catholicism, it's an indication of where the Church of Rome is moving. It is moving into a universalist religion. They want to embrace many religions so that they can formulate the religion of the future. Because that's ultimately where Jesuits are taking the church. They're taking the church, and have been for decades now, moving the church away from its traditional roots, the Catholic Church, I mean, and they're moving it towards as I said, a universalist doctrine, and are formulating a new...
But the Catholic Church nowadays has taken over everybody, including the problem that is now happening in the Methodist Church is happening because of the Catholic. Every church...
Exactly, yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah,
that's right. It's becoming very
even
universalist.
Even the Mormons were allowed to build for the first time a mega galactic gigantic temple in Rome because they made a deal with the Vatican. The Mormons are, together with the Catholic Church, the ones who provide for 90% of the agents who work in the CIA.
You know, you had the Jesuit order. They were really considered in the beginning. They were the agents of the Pope. They were the Pope's men. And they were fiercely loyal to the Pope, and their one of their primary goals, one of Loyola's primary objectives, was to expand the power and influence of the Pope all over the world. So they started off, which is ironic. The Jesuit order started off as a very, very conservative order, loyal to the Pope of Rome, loyal unto death, directly to the Pope of Rome. And what's interesting is that back in the 1960s, they transitioned.
It changed with the Second Vatican Council.
After Vatican II, they transitioned and they became adversarial to the Pope. They became adversarial to traditional Catholicism.
Until eventually, with what is known as the St. Gallen Mafia, which was this group, this lodge that they shaped, they put together in Switzerland, all the Jesuit leaders were able to then eventually place Bergoglio. They already attempted to place Bergoglio when Ratzinger was elected. That didn't work out, but they then managed to blackmail Ratzinger to a level that he had to resign.
That's right. Blackmail him, again, remembering that the Jesuits control that intelligence apparatus. They're the primary controllers of the intelligence apparatus at the Vatican. So it's not difficult for the Jesuits to blackmail somebody. They have the information. They're the ones controlling most of the...
And during the Second Vatican Council, we noticed that there were two popes, of course, Papa Roncalli and then Papa Montini, and these two popes were also Freemasons. They were also Freemasons, and Freemasonry, and that, of course, was already linked to the Jesuits, in particular French Freemasonry, became very important for what went on during the Second Vatican Council.
And the Second Vatican Council is essential to understanding, and this is what we were referencing earlier, understanding what we're seeing now, the amalgamation of the Vatican and modern Catholicism with the Great Reset and the globalist cabal, because they're amalgamating right now before our eyes. And the bridge that brings them together is the Jesuits and liberation theology. Okay. That's the bridge that's closing that gap between the globalists and the Pope of Rome.
And the then fact you have, let's not forget the Rothschild family, because reinforced the Rothschild has become also inspirational for the Coalition for Inclusive Capitalism of the Vatican, which is a very important new institution where we find also Pier Giorgio Bassi, Vice President of the Academy of the Illuminati, and various other figures. But I mean, Lynn Forrester Rothschild is a Democrat, a friend of all the Democrat leaders. She's actually, connected not only to, just in an informal way. She's actually an active part of the Democratic Party here in the US, though her husband is, of course, Sir Evelyn de Rothschild is not really an American, but she is very much connected with the Clintons, for example. Now, people don't know this, but Bill and Hillary Clinton are particularly, so now that we see Hillary attempting another run or wanting to come back into the field, we have, of course, these people in the background lurking, you know. So people need to understand that the Council for Inclusive Capitalism is like a modern Illuminati project to gather all these very influential people within the capitalist world and then open them up to something that they call inclusive, which is basically then communism.
Right. And that's why that bridging of the gap between the socio-political Marxist movement, which today I think we can identify as the Great Reset, at least that's the execution of their plan, and the religious aspect, the Universalist Catholic aspect, and I'm not saying that traditional Catholics are not Universalists. Traditional Catholics are very conservative, but this Pope is a Universalist, and so are the Jesuits by and large. They have no allegiance whatsoever to traditional Catholicism, or certainly not to the gospel of Christ. Their gospel is a social gospel. Their gospel is liberation theology. And so when finally they were able to install, one of their own order on the throne of Peter, as the Pope of Rome, what they effectively were able to do was to put one of the final pieces in place for the so-called New World Order, which is a religious apparatus that would not only support the New World Order, that would supply it with a as I said before, with the formulation, the beginnings of a new religion, but would also support it in its socio-political policies. And that is precisely what we see Pope Francis doing. Pope Francis is like one of the biggest cheerleader for the Great Reset and for diversity, inclusion, equity. And this is why, because the Jesuits installed him to do precisely what he's doing. And really, and I think you would agree with this, I think we talked about this in Rome, what the Jesuits are doing right now is they are dismantling Catholicism. They're dismantling Catholicism. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Leo, but I think there's somewhat of a civil war going on at the Vatican between the traditionalists, the Pope Benedict traditionalists. Because people need to remember Pope Benedict is still alive. So there's this conflict going on between the traditionalists and then the Jesuit faction, which are liberation theology Marxists, and who are supporting the Great Reset and pushing the Great Reset. And those guys are winning. And the Pope, that's why the Pope is so aggressively for the vaccine mandates, for example. That's why this Pope is so aggressively in favor of open borders. I mean, he's just promulgating the socio-political policies of the globalist elite.
Absolutely, but he also gets a lot of money, and the Vatican always has a say. Non si canta messa senza I soldi. I mean, you don't sing the mass without the money. I mean, they're getting a bunch of money from Soros. They're getting a bunch of money from the Chinese. They are really, and then you have the successor to the Pope, the possible successor, which is Ghanaian Cardinal Peter Turkson, who is very much in charge, or at least was up until very recently, of an important dicastery, and who is regarded by Klaus Schwab and all the others as a very important figure in their Great Reset policy. So the Catholic liberal agenda, there is an internal war, but I tell you from my own experience, I mean, I was born and raised into the Catholic Church, and of course in Rome. So I know very well what you're talking about. I think that these days, yes, we have the occasional person like for example, Archbishop Vigano. But the problem is, that in the last few years, because you came to Rome in 2015, but the situation got even worse afterwards, because anybody opposing Pope Francis will be cornered, will be basically will lose his job and will not be relevant anymore in the political asset of the Vatican. He methodically took away every single dicastery nomination that was made by Pope Ratzinger. He made sure that he elected a number of cardinals. So then he, even if he resigns or he dies, he still controls the election of the next pope. Because when he nominated this extraordinary number of cardinals, people then started to question him. Why is he doing that? He's doing it because he wants to make a progressive church last also for the next papacy. So
that's right. And again, I think it's more than just a progressive church. I think what the Pope is doing
is a satanic.
Well, that's true. What the Pope is doing with the support of the Jesuit order is they are transforming the church into a new religious paradigm. And into this new religious paradigm that the Jesuits are helping them create is the question of extraterrestrials, and that's a topic.
That is another thing.
That's a topic of another discussion. You and I could probably could talk for 2 hours on that. I think we should.
It's a topic that I discuss very profusely also in this book in one chapter.
Yes, I saw that in your.
It's a topic of great importance that brings us also back to talk also about artificial intelligence. And I know that we have certain differences, and I actually said in my book, maybe. I see this alien phenomenon as being predominantly demonic, but of course I can understand, and I actually applauded you for this. I actually wrote a thing, I don't know if you read it in the book about it. I said Timothy Alberino explained it perfectly in his book, that you can't consider the UFOs necessarily evil because they are the hardware, not the software. They are the physical part. Then, if you have a Ferrari, it can be driven by an angel or a demon, but the Ferrari is always the Ferrari. So I like this. I remember at one point of the book, I took this example that you gave because I saw it as very fitting, because at times people can see the phenomenon, the UFO phenomenon, only as being demonic, but the actual UFO in itself,
it's hardware. It's hardware.
Yeah, and then so I said, I cited that part in which you say they share the same general appearance, the same heritage, the same language.
That's right.
The same customs, the same knowledge, because they're fallen angels. So they had all this technology.
They hail from the same civilization.
Yes. So I liked very much that thing. I, of course, think that the abduction phenomenon, though, has a lot of similarities with the possession phenomenon. So
Well, we're going to put a pin in that conversation because that'll be for another time. Next time, absolutely. You and I will discuss aliens in the Vatican and
absolutely,
and the ongoing strange rollout of disclosure from the Pentagon and how that relates to what's going on at the Vatican. That's a whole nother discussion. I'm sure my audience will be very eager for us to have that discussion. So I'm going to have you come back on. Some other time, maybe in a couple of months, Leo.
Okay, thank you so much.
But let's wrap this conversation, and I want to encourage everybody to read Leo's books. Leo is a great writer. As I say, he's a prolific author. I have a bunch of Leo's books right here, and I think you gave me this one, The Last Pope, which I read a couple of years ago. I think you gave me this one while I was with you in Rome.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah,
and so I encourage everybody to get Leo's Confessions of the Illuminati series, especially his new book, which I have and have begun to read the other day in preparation for this talk with Leo. So I encourage everybody to go get his book. Leo, where can people get your book, and how do people follow you?
Well, they can follow me through leozagami.com, and they get the links to all my latest books connected to my various articles, which I tend to publish on a regular basis. Thank you for having me on, because I saw that you started this new project, and already from the first episode, you touched on very interesting subjects. Also, that I can really relate to, like transhumanism, for example. And I think you're doing a great work to really unveil this reality for your audience. We are living in a crucial time. You see, this book is only partly, today we of course will not touch that part, but is also part manual to survive the incoming phases, most difficult phases of this unfolding of the apocalypse, which is here and now. It's not going. It's going to happen in our lifetime, and unfortunately, people need to understand that they need to be ready for it, and they need to be on the right side, not only of history but of God, because it's at this moment and no other that will decide the fate of humanity. Either we are Homo sapiens and we stay as a reflection of God, or either we start merging with the machine and become some kind of monstrosity, which of course will enhance the possibility of life expectancy, going on other planets and doing all kinds of things. But we have been built the reflection, perfect image of God, which I respect, and I want to stay a Homo sapiens.
And obviously, I absolutely agree with those statements. In fact, I talk a lot about these subjects in my book, Birthright. So if you haven't read my book,
excellent book.
Thank you. Birthright: The Coming Post-Human Apocalypse and the Usurpation of Adam's Dominion on Planet Earth. Go get my book and get it on Amazon. Get Leo's book, and if you haven't signed up for the conference yet, go get your tickets to the conference. The tickets are selling fast. They're on sale right now, 20% off. I hope to see you in Nashville. And so next time I talk to Leo, I think we're going to be talking about aliens and the connection with the Vatican, and I'm looking forward to that conversation. But let's end this one here. So, Leo, thank you very much for your time and for having this conversation with me.
Thank you, Timothy, and keep on the great work.
Thank you.